Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me again. This week we're going to look into the often overlooked world of open chords and how to really get a command over them and make them sound truly beautiful. I feel like a lot of players really only have a passing command over the open position chords. I feel like they take them for granted and move on too soon to other supposedly flashier things like stretchy jazz voicings and the like. There's so much that we can gain by diving a little deeper into these supposedly simple open position chords. I mean, just listen to how gorgeous that is, the way they ring out. I mean, who couldn't love that? This chord study is going to involve a simple and fairly typical country pop Americana chord progression in the key of C. We're going to be outlining the 1, the 4 and the 5, so those would be the chords C, F and G. And this piece is played in a 3/4 time signature, so a waltz time. To kick things off, we're going to start on our 1 chord, a C chord, but we're going to put the G in the bass as well as the root, so technically this would be a C over G chord. We're going to start with the second finger off, allowing that D string to be open, and then hammer on to the second fret, the major third. For me, this is one of the most important tricks in open position playing, learning how to hammer on into notes within your chord shapes. Then we're going to continue along that same vein, playing a double stop on the D and G strings before hitting the root note, and then going on to the F chord where we do a very similar thing again. So this would be F over C technically. We're not bothered about the 2 E strings currently. We're going to hammer on from the open G to the second fret. And then the same kind of idea again. Double stops, this time on the G and B strings. Pick out the root note. These little moments here where we've collected a sus2 kind of sound, these are beautiful. These are things to really try and get into your playing. These moments of transition. sus2. sus4. All of that good stuff. We go back to our C over G chord next. This time we're only bothered about getting the bottom 4 strings. Then we get that double stop again at strings D and G. Pull off to the open D, play the root, and now we're on to the 5 chord, the G. And just the same as we've done on our 1 and our 4, we're going to hammer on to the major third from a whole tone below. So that would be open A and open D, hit them together, hammer to the second fret of the A string. Don't block the D string when you hammer on. Now throughout that entire passage I'm keeping this G note down in the bass because there's no need to remove it. We then pick that note out. Now because we're on the 5 chord in the key of C, we can think of this as G7, therefore why not add the flat 7? Add that little finger to the 3rd fret of the D string, pick strings D, G and B, 3, 0, 0. That resolves beautifully to this C major triad, first inversion string set 2. You can see it as part of your C shape here, but we are being very selective. We want to hit strings D, G and B only, and I'm hybrid picking them at the same time. Now we're heading back to the 4 chord next, the F. So why not put a C7 in along the way? That's, as we've spoken about in the past, a secondary dominant chord. We can refer to that as the 5 of 4 because C7 is the 5 of F. And all it does is it creates a little bit of drama and puts that F chord on a pedestal so that when we resolve to it, it feels very natural. We can hear that we're leading the way towards it. So you got your C, and then same thing we did on G a moment ago, where we did the flat 7, the root and the 3rd. We're doing that for C now, flat 7, root, 3rd. So you've got C, C7, then that resolves to F. This F major triad on the 1st string set, 1st inversion, frets 2, 1 and 1, hammering on again from the open string to the 2nd fret of the G string. Always hammering onto this major 3rd. Very useful trick to remember. And then like we spoke about earlier, we get that kind of sus2 sound for a moment because we have the open G ringing while we add the root down on the 3rd fret of the D string. Then we go back to C and play this. So that's frets 3 and 3 on the D and B strings. We hybrid pick those together, slide a whole tone higher, come back, and then play frets 2 and 1, again part of that C major chord, keep them ringing while we pick another part of that C major chord, the 3rd fret of the A string and the open G. I love this kind of stuff. To me it's very bell-like, picking pairs of notes within a chord shape. Now we're headed to the 5 chord, so that's G or G7, and we play this before resolving to C. On the G7 that was flat 7, sus4, root, major 3rd, and then this little C major triad again, string set 2. And then we do what I think of as a fairly common gospel kind of sounding move. Quick little stop off at the 2 chord before going back to the 1. So that's a D minor triad, and then back to a C major chord where again I'm hybrid picking the middle 4 strings, everything but the 2 E strings basically. So you've got G7, C, D minor, C. So as always, I've prepared some very thorough lesson materials for this. If you want to get hold of those, do check out the links in the description. I have a Patreon where for a small monthly fee you get access to all of my lesson materials, past, present and future, and a ton of bonus stuff as well. We're at well over 300 members now, all like-minded musicians with a thirst for knowledge, and I'd like to think it's quite an inspiring place to be. But if Patreon isn't your thing, you can go to the Gumroad link to get hold of the materials for this lesson in particular. Either way, I massively appreciate your support, and it allows me to keep making these videos, so thank you so much. Oh, and I should also mention that my backing track will be included in the download for this lesson. Okay, so to summarize, I'm just going to do a run through the A section. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we've landed on this C chord, and we're about to move into our B section. We'd play this little 3-note pickup melody to run into it. We play the open G, the 1st fret of the B, the 3rd fret of the B, and now the B section begins here. We have the open E, the 1st fret of the B, open G. So there's our C chord. Now we're looking ahead to what comes up in the next bar. That would be the F, the 4 chord. So again, like we did a moment ago, we could imply C7 if we like. That would be the 5 of 4. It would set that F up nicely. Now we take it one step further. If you can play a C7, you could also play a C augmented. In my mind, I simply think of the augmented chord as being pretty much completely interchangeable with the dominant chord. So in a scenario where we could play C7 to F, we could also choose to play C augmented to F. A nice way to look at that is that you could take a C7 and you can resolve this flat 7, the B flat, down a semitone to the 3rd of F, the A note. Or you can choose to come up from a semitone below by playing C augmented, where the sharp and 5th is a semitone below the A note. Either way, it's like an enclosure, whether you go from above or below. It sounds great either way, right? So with that said, we're just going to descend this C augmented triad. That takes us to F, where instead of just playing a regular F major, which we could have done, we play one of these F sus2 chords again. 3rd fret of the D string, open G, 1st fret of the B. I love the sound of that. It's so rich. Now with that F sus2 ringing out, if we want to go back to C now, all we really have to do is drop that note on the D string a semitone to the major 3rd. Again, try not to disrupt those ringing notes. We want this to have a bell-like quality to it. It's the whole benefit of these open position chords. So far, in our B section, we've got this. So now we're back on our C chord and we're going to play through from the bottom string. We've got the C over G kind of structure now. 3rd fret, open, hammer to 2. Now still thinking C major, let's play a double stop on strings B and G. So that's the open G with the first fret of the B. Move that second finger down off the D string and hammer on to the second fret of the G string. Back to the open D, then the second fret to put that C chord back in place. It's worth really exploring those hammer-ons. Anything you can grab in and around the chord shape. Now we go to the 5 chord, G7. We're going to play this G9 sus4. Takes us back to C beautifully. So just to mention a couple of things here, this G7 or G9 sus4 could also be named F over G. And you can see why. There's an F major triad here and a G in the bass. Because we're playing this over our 5 chord over the G, we want to name it as such. So again, context will dictate how you name your chords. So to me this is a G9 with a sus4. And then we take the sus away, allowing the B string to be open. Now we just have G9. And then we move that 9 down a semitone to make it a flat 9. So that would be G7 flat 9. And I'm hybrid picking that G9 sus4 chord. I'm using the plectrum on the low E, second finger, third finger and fourth finger picking strings D, G and B. So far that would be. And then that's going to resolve beautifully back to C over G, where again we focus on the bottom 4 strings of the chord. We go back to this little bluegrass idea that I've mentioned in some of my other videos, pulling off from the minor third to the second degree of the scale. So we're on the C chord, minor third is here, the E flat, pull off to the open D string, then come down the root and the 5th of your C chord. You know, the blues tends to favour going the other way, up from the minor third to the major third. Whereas what I hear a lot in bluegrass is the opposite, minor third down to the second degree of the scale. Now we think ahead to the next chord, F, the 4 chord. We're on this G note currently, so we're going to walk chromatically up to A. So that's your major third of F. So this would be an F major spread triad, 3rd, root, 5th. And then we're going to resolve that down to a C major spread triad on the same string set. 5th, 3rd, root. Then we play a very typical pedal steel kind of lick on the C chord. This requires a bit of stretching to allow the notes to truly ring cleanly. So I'm picking the 5th fret of the D string, and I'm picking the 2nd fret of the G, hammering on to the 4th fret. So first finger to second finger, that's where the stretch comes in. Then hammer on again to the 5th fret of the G with the little finger. And while that rings, grab the top 2 strings at the 3rd fret and bring them in as well. Now the 5 chord appears, the G7, we play this. And resolve to C. This is one of these tricks I've mentioned a lot in my other country videos. Think of that as a G13 or a G6 kind of sound. I guess G13 is the proper thing to call it because this chord is a dominant 7th chord. Walk it down chromatically till it becomes G9, and then resolve back to that same C major triad that we've used a couple of times already, the first inversion triad on string set 2. And then we backfill, bring in a bit of the low end, the 5th and the root. Now we go to the 5 chord as a kind of turnaround, so that's our G chord or our G7. Or in this case, G augmented, because we're going to apply that same trick we spoke about earlier on the C7. We said C7 and C augmented were interchangeable, so therefore G7 and G augmented must be interchangeable too. The only caveat I would say about that is that you want to make sure that if you play an augmented, you better resolve up a 4th afterwards, otherwise it's not really going to sound particularly good or smooth, or like it's moving in the direction it wants to move in. So this G augmented wants to resolve resolve up a fourth to C major. And we better allow it to have its way, otherwise it's just going to sound like a dead end. These low string augmented triads are so great. You know, these sound very much like the old baritone guitar parts on those country and western tunes in the good old days. These low notes. We're just going to pick out specifically the strings A, D and G. So that would be the third, the sharp 5 and the root. And then we're going to resolve onto a C6 chord, but with the 5th in the bass as well as the root. So there's your 5th, your root, your 3rd and your 6th. C6 with the G in the bass. Okay, so to summarize, here's the B section played all the way through. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's the first beat of our C section solo. We let that ring, and then we pick the open G string. Now we slide in from the minor to the major 3rd on the D string, grab the root, then we grab the flat 7 back to the 3rd again. We want that flat 7 because we're trying to imply C7 along the way to the F chord again, you know, the 5 of 4. So we play, and then the open A string, we pick that along with the root note of the F, the 3rd fret of the D. So the A is the major 3rd, so this is like a first inversion F major chord. I love the sound of that. So we've got the 3rd in the bass, and then we're bringing in that sus2 or add 9 sound again on the open G string, and then going back to C via the hammer-on again from the open D string to the major 3rd at the 2nd fret. Then we revisit that bluegrass idea again, but we play it a bit slower and with more purpose, makes it sound a little more country and western. And then we respond to that with these little 6ths, this bluesy sounding idea. 3 and 3 on the D and B strings again like earlier, but this time we slide up to the 4th fret, brings in that kind of bluesy flavour, back to the C major triad. Open G, 2nd fret of the G. Then we slide these 2 strings up a whole tone for the G major chord, the 3rd fret of the B, 4th fret of the G. That's your 5th and your 3rd of your G chord. We then complete this triad by adding the 3rd finger to the D string 5th fret. At that point we remove the B string from the equation, pick this little double stop, walk it down chromatically just like earlier, still thinking G7 at this point, but then we quickly throw in a bit of an F minor 6 by dropping that G string a semitone further. So now you've got part of an F minor triad, root, flat 3, and there's your 6 on top at the 3rd fret of the B string. So you're thinking G7, F minor 6, back to C. That F minor 6 is what we call the 4 minor. You'll have seen me speak about that a lot if you've seen any of my other videos. It's one of the most beautiful ways you can get back to your 1 chord. So in that case we're really just thinking 5, 4 minor, 1, G7, F minor 6, back to C, where again we get one of these really lush washes of C major goodness, hitting everything but the top E string, and we've got the G in the bass as well, by the way. Again, I'm allowing the open D string to be involved to begin with, so I have somewhere to hammer in from to the major 3rd. Then again we get a bit of that sus2 kind of sound on the C chord by playing these 3 notes and let them cascade together. 3rd fret of the B string, 5th fret of the G, 5th fret of the D. So that would be the sus2, the root and the 5th. Now we're going to embark on a fairly common sequence in country and blues music. We go to the 4 chord, where I'm playing it this way. So I've got my F major triad here on strings D, G and B. My thumb is hooked over to play the root. I'm hybrid picking the root, the D and the G strings together, then picking out the B string. This is what some people call like the Hendrix grip, but this has been around for a long time. It's a really good one to practice because you get a lot of freedom by playing your chords this way. The little finger becomes spare. I definitely recommend putting some time into that shape if you're not comfortable with it already. So that's our 4 chord. Then another way of getting back to the 1, we spoke about the 4 minor a second ago, and we could do that again, but we choose the other equally common option, the sharp 4 diminished. So all we're thinking here is F was the 4, so the sharp 4 is F sharp. We play a diminished chord off that root, so F sharp diminished 7. And we play that this way, second finger, first finger is barring strings D, G and B at the first fret. Get your third finger on the second fret of the G string and hybrid pick the same string sets as we did on the F. And then keeping in that theme, we go to the C chord to resolve that on the same string set with the 5th in the bass, because that gives us this chromatic bass line, F to F sharp to G. 4, sharp 4 diminished, the 1 with the 5th in the bass. Now keep that 5th in the bass because we want to go to the 5 next. We're going to play this. This is a G9, just like earlier on. Root, flat 7, 9, 3rd. And then we add on top the 13 or the 6. So it's kind of a fancy chord, right? You normally see it played this way, G13 or G13 with a 9 on top. Only this time we've got the 13 on top and the 9 is kind of buried in the middle. And then we go to the 4 and play before going back to the 1. So on the 4 there we had the F, we play it with the C in the bass, open G bringing in that sus2 sound again, the root, and then finishing everything on this beautifully fat sounding C major triad. Second inversion, string set 4. So to summarize that, here's the C section played from start to finish. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I hope you've enjoyed some of these open chord ideas. I really do recommend that you work on these things quite a bit so that you do have something useful to play when you're not soloing. I find that a lot of lead players fall into this category where they can solo really well and they can play some basic rhythm parts, but they're not quite sure what to do when they're not soloing. This is a good start. This stuff is studio gold. If you go into a session and start laying down things like this, the producer will absolutely love you, because it shows a lot of respect to the music, it doesn't get in the way of anything, and it's textural. We value texture and tone as much as we do the note choice with this kind of stuff. So yeah, make sure that you work on getting really good articulation on these notes. Make sure the fingers are really hooked over so that you're not blocking out any strings, and really do keep everything ringing out as much as you can. So there's a couple of songs that I'd really like you guys to check out as kind of a listening homework. Hold On by Tom Waits off the Mule Variations record. It's full of these beautiful open string kinds of textures and layers. Also Not Dark Yet by Bob Dylan off the Time Out of Mind album. Again, a very similar kind of playing style. And also The Car Was the One by Mark Knopfler off his Get Lucky album. They're just 3 examples off the top of my head, and you can really hear how that stuff dictates the mood of the entire recording. It's really beautiful. Alright guys, thanks as ever for your support and your enthusiasm. It really means a lot to me, and I'll see you guys next week. Alright, take care.